Good morning. We come to the third of our series in Proverbs. We've looked a little bit just about the kind of literature it is, and also we looked at last week just about how it shapes our life. And that's really what I'm going to be picking up on today a little bit when I talk about Christian character that we see in the book of Proverbs and how wisdom plays into our character. I was having a conversation earlier this week with one of my daughters about doing kind of a work aptitude test. And it's really interesting, our different perspectives. She was saying, oh, but it's 2 hours by train there and back again. And I'm saying to her, but actually, if it helps you find the right job, the right work, then actually 30 years time, you're going to look back and say, that's probably the best 2 hours I've spent. It's all about our perspective and where we see things. But of course, wisdom isn't just about having more years and being able to see things over a period of time. What Proverbs helps us to understand is that there is a really important aspect of our character that Proverbs helps us to shape. And of course, what it does is it just looks at us and makes comments on observations, but also therefore it helps us to see ourselves. And so we're going to explore a little bit this morning something to do with character. Because of course there is wisdom that comes from years, but also it's often contrasted to education. Surely you can get everything that you need with education. And what we'll see is that there is a difference. Education leads to qualifications, but actually that's not the same as what Proverbs describes as wisdom. For example, it talks about the acquisition of skill, absolutely, but also questions about ability, courage, perseverance, stamina. These aren't things that you learn. It's not an education. It's a thing that when you look at yourself, you need to decide, actually, are these things that I need to do or not? These are areas in which you need to grow or not. And so undoubtedly character is made up over time, but it's also very, very easy just to avoid any kind of looking at our character and say, just that's the way I am. You know, some of us are gentle, some of us are friendly, some of us are talkative. It's part of who our character is. And therefore it's easy just to look at Proverbs and say, well, that's all very well for them because that's that type of person and I'm not like that. But that's not the purpose of Proverbs. Proverbs is there so that we can grow in wisdom. And part of that is looking at our character and finding what are the areas in which my character needs to grow. How do I learn to acquire skills that are not my natural instinct? And that's why Proverbs is so important. It helps us realize not just how we can lead a comfortable or a competent life, but how we can have some of those godly characteristics. Remember, we talked a little bit in the first one about how some of the fruits of the Spirit you can see really, really clearly when you look, for example, in Proverbs. And so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at how we grow as people, not just the things that we can learn to make ourselves more successful. But also central to, in a sense, the character is what flows from that. Because so much of Proverbs is around comparisons and decision making. So for example, there are 375 Proverbs that are giving instruction, but 273 of those, you can work out the percentages, have a but in. So they're saying, well, it's this, but that. And it's helping you, in a sense, look at comparisons and say, okay, what is the godly and wise choice? Adam talked a little bit about this last week, that character is actually determined by the direction of our hearts. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. What Proverbs is saying is, just don't think that it's competence that determines who you are. There's something deeply profound about your identity that will determine who you are. And actually, what's in your heart, remember Jesus said this too, that it's not what goes into you that makes you unclean, but it's what comes out of you. So actually the things that we say, the things that, how we view hard work and effort, how we view friendship and all these kinds of things, actually they're the things that kind of flow out from us. And so it's right that we understand the importance of our hearts in making wise choices. So we might eschew revenge or honesty. We don't want to get caught up in gambling and the way in which that seems to be so much part of our culture today. Not because those are easy choices to make, but actually in a world that's going more and more in those directions, for example, it's about us saying, well, there is a sensible choice here, there is a godly choice, which might not be the choice of the majority, and therefore I will make sure I do the right thing. And so it's seeing the world the right way up, which is again why we come back to chapter 1 verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And then what we see again is that we see that there is a kind of a rhythm to the way the heart works. I don't dance, but I do know that when I ski, there is a kind of a rhythm that you need to go, and actually it flows. And when you're in that rhythm, everything goes so well, and it just seems as if it's the easiest thing on earth. Proverbs is saying that, look, this is in a sense about the rhythm of life. So we see things like 10:3, the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked. The blessings of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. The way of the Lord is a stronghold to the blameless, but destruction to evildoers. Of course, what this is pointing us to is the fact that we have a covenant God, and therefore that actually if we live well with him, then he keeps his promises towards us. He gives us wonderful blessings. And so, of course, this is the importance of understanding the perspective of the writer of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. Not just talking about our human existence, saying, well, actually, you'll live to 80 if you're godly, and you'll die when you're 50 if you're not good. No, it's saying there is an eternal perspective here. And of course, if you don't get that eternal perspective, then you just look at this as a bunch of instructions and miss the point. So it's about the attitude of the heart, wanting to honour Jesus, wanting to love God, wanting to live for God in a world that has lots and lots of other opportunities, and saying actually it might be better and easier to live this way, and saying actually no, I'm going to go the godly way because I've got an eternal perspective and I know how the story ends. The second thing is that character is informed by careful thoughts. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his mouth is wise. There's another one, it says better to remember, which I think is a little bit funnier, but we'll come back to that when we do the one on speaking. It says, better to keep silent and be thought of a fool than to open your mouth and prove it. It's that idea of, well, actually, it's probably good just to say a little bit less. But of course, you can't say, well, that's the way I'm going to go into a job interview and I will just sit there and not answer any questions because refraining from answering is wise. Of course not. You see, that's the thing with Proverbs. It's not just this is how you do it. It's helping you just to think through what is good or not to do. So another one, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Well, there was all kinds of conversations last week, weren't there, about the fact that England were the best team in the tournament and they deserved to win and all the rest of it. Some of you will have been cheering those on. Some of you will have just been keeping quiet because there's just nothing to say, is there, at times like that. And yet also there's a contrasting one. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So if somebody says to you, it's impossible to believe in a creator God, it might be that actually if you're quiet, for example, they think that you agree with them. So there are times when it's better to be quiet. It's times when actually you say, no, I need to say something into this. I need to speak into what's going on here. And of course, do you see, that's why Proverbs is challenging. This isn't a kind of a manual, do this and you will be successful. Not at all. And of course, if the scoffer were here next to me, they're saying, oh, well, of course, the Bible's full of contradictions. It tells you to speak and then it tells you to keep quiet. No, not at all. What it's saying is that we have to work out for ourselves what is appropriate and right and good. And there will be a time to speak and there will be a time to remain silent. It's not that the Bible is contradicting itself. Rather, Proverbs is observing these two things and saying, I've seen both of them and both of them are true. And you need to hold them in the balance of your life and determine what you do or don't do at any particular moment. Thirdly, character is expressed in the daily decisions in the details of life. A couple here. The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the cravings of the wicked. It would be easy, wouldn't it, if Proverbs came in a nice block like this, and so verse 4 goes on, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. It would be great, isn't it, if we could just say, oh, well, there must be a section on work. But there isn't, because of course you've got to balance that against some of the other ones. For example, 10:26, like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him. In a sense here, they're looking at different sides of work. He who gathers in the summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in a harvest is a son who brings shame. And so there's kind of what you see here is just some simple principles, isn't it? You know, trust God, work hard. This is what it looks like in practice and what to avoid. And it's great when you've got a kind of a little section like that helps us. And chapter 10 is a really good one actually for going to think about some of the things that might be helpful in the workplace. But it's more than that. The wise of heart will receive commandments, but a babbling fool will come to ruin. Verse 8, whoever heeds instructions is on the path to life, but he who rejects reproof leads others astray. Verse 17. And so what you see, in a sense, is that they're saying, look, there are some daily decisions in life about work and life and family, but actually there is discernment needed. And so therefore, are you learning as you go through life? Are you picking up those kinds of details? Going on, character results in huge consequences. If it's about daily decisions, then good decisions will have good consequences, and maybe some unwise decisions will not have such good consequences. And so there are some contrasting outcomes in chapter 10. Look at this. A slack hand causes poverty, 10 verse 4, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. That's another one of those buts, you see. There are comparisons there. Or again, verse 6, blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. And so they're saying, look, this is the way the world is. Be wise in the way you look at it, discern. And actually when you see that people who, as it says here, a slack hand, means that things will not come your way and that you'll lead a life of poverty and misery, it says learn from that. Of course, what it's not saying is that poverty and misery are necessarily all that person's fault. In some cases it may be, in some cases not. There are other things where it talks about it. But it's saying, look, the person who doesn't work will not pass their exams. The person who keeps on skipping off work early is the person that's most likely to be let go. It's saying, see these things, understand, and make sure that your character grows so that you can overcome these tendencies in yourself. When the tempest passes, verse 25, the wicked is no more, but the righteous is established forever. And in verse 28, the hope of the righteous brings joy, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. And so again, you see here, this is about our perspective on character. We think we're in total control. We think that everything is determined by our work, our effort, our intelligence, our connections, maybe our family. But actually what this reminds us is that God will have the final say. That we don't just live in this world for the here and now. We're not existentialists that say this is all that there is. But actually we live under God. We recognise that there is a greater perspective, and therefore God will have the final word on how we've lived our lives. Whether we've trusted in Jesus, whether we've given our lives to him, and if we have done that, whether in fact our lives flow as a consequence of that. He will be the one who judges. But also, not just the end point, then actually God says, look, live my way and you will see human flourishing. And of course we know that, don't we? When Jesus talks about, how many times we'll need to forgive, and he said, 70 times 7, when people ask for something and you give them more, all those kinds of things. In a sense, Jesus taught a really radical way of living. And of course we know that that's, in a broken world, not easy to see. But actually, if we trust in it, then actually we know that God's way will prevail. And of course, therefore, it's a spiritual battle, isn't it? Verse 29, the way of the Lord is a stronghold to the blameless, but destruction to evildoers. Even when it's hard or difficult, trust, and the Lord will protect us. We can trust in him. So that's just kind of a little brief, quick trail through some of the stuff on character in Proverbs.